In 1981, the Specialized Stump Jumper changed cycling forever with a steel frame, geometry nobody had seen before, and a ride feel modern bikes can't replicate. Today, riders are tracking down these vintage machines and fitting them with technology from 2026. Are old 4130 chromoly frames really better, or is this resurgence just nostalgia? The truth runs deeper than you think. When the first production mountain bikes rolled out in the early 1980s, their shapes looked nothing like the carbon rockets of today. The Specialized Stump Jumper, debuting in 1981, and the Trek 900, following soon after, both arrived with a new kind of geometry that set them apart from anything else on the road or trail. Instead of sharp, twitchy steering borrowed from racing bikes, these frames featured head tube angles from 71 to 72 degrees, deliberately slacker than the 74 or 75 degrees common on road bikes at the time. This single change slowed down the steering and made the bikes more predictable over loose rocks and rutted fire roads. Chainstay length was another deliberate choice. Early Stump Jumpers and Trek 900 models stretched their rear triangles out to 425 or even 440 millimeters, a full centimeter or more longer than many modern hardtails. The result was a wheelbase that kept the rider centered, with more weight over the rear tire. On steep climbs, this meant the back wheel stayed glued to the dirt, and front-end lift was less of a problem. Descending, the longer wheelbase and relaxed head angle worked together to keep the bike steady at speed, resisting the tendency to pitch or dart unexpectedly. The numbers themselves, 71 or 72 degrees up front and 425 to 440 millimeters out back, sound subtle, but the ride feel was anything but. Riders found they could pick their way through technical sections with a sense of calm, even on rigid frames and skinny tires. The geometry gave these steel bikes a planted, stable character that defined the earliest years of mountain biking. Both the Stump Jumper and Trek 900 set a template: long chainstays for traction, relaxed steering for control, and enough room in the frame to clear mud and fit wide tires. These choices were not just about comfort. They reflected a new understanding of how geometry could shape the experience of riding off-road. The bikes became trusted tools for adventure, not just because of their materials, but because their very angles and lengths were tuned for the unknown. As new materials and designs arrived in later decades, these early geometry choices fell out of fashion. But the numbers remain, stamped into steel, ready to be rediscovered by a new generation of riders looking for a different kind of connection to the trail. 4130 chromoly steel is the backbone of these classic mountain bikes, and its properties set it apart from both older mild steels and the aluminum alloys that would later dominate the market. The numbers tell the story. 4130 is an alloy containing about 0.3% carbon, 0.8 to 1.1% chromium, and 0.15 to 0.25% molybdenum. This blend gives the tubes a balance of strength and ductility that is hard to match. With a Young's modulus around 210 gigapascals, chromoly is 3 times stiffer than 6061 aluminum, which comes in at about 69 gigapascals. Density, though, is higher. 7.85 grams per cubic centimeter for steel versus 2.7 for aluminum, so the same volume weighs more, but the extra stiffness means less material is needed for strength. What does this mean for the ride? Riders talk about steel's dampening effect, the sense that the frame soaks up trail buzz rather than passing every jolt to the hands and feet. Material scientists point to the way steel's internal structure absorbs energy. When a shockwave travels through a steel tube, some of that energy is dissipated as heat before it reaches the rider. Aluminum, by contrast, transmits vibrations more directly, which can make a frame feel harsh on rough ground. A materials engineer who has studied bicycle frames puts it this way: steel flexes just enough to take the edge off high-frequency chatter, especially in thinner-walled tubes. That is what people mean by forgiving. The frame is not dead, it is alive, but it does not rattle your teeth out. Lab tests back up these rider impressions. Accelerometer data from restored 1980s Stump Jumpers and Trek 900s show lower peak vibrations and a smoother frequency curve compared to period-correct aluminum frames. The numbers are not subtle. Steel frames can reduce high-frequency vibration by 20 to 30%, depending on tube diameter and wall thickness. This measurable comfort advantage is one reason so many riders are drawn back to chromoly frames. It is not nostalgia alone, it is physics you can feel. The next step is to see how these properties hold up in a side-by-side lab test, with real accelerometer traces capturing the difference between steel and aluminum on the same stretch of rocky trail. Inside the cluttered workbench of a community bike shop, a shop manager sorts through a mix of old and new components. On the stand, a 1980s Trek 900 frame waits for its second life. The plan is simple. Bring this steel classic up to modern standards with a single chainring drivetrain, called 1x. The first compatibility check happens at the rear dropout. Most vintage steel frames from the era use 126mm or 130mm spacing, which often fits an 8 to 10-speed free hub with minor cold setting or a simple axle swap. The shop manager demonstrates sliding in a modern 11-speed free hub, adding a 1.85mm spacer if needed to fit the cassette snugly. Chainline is next. Vintage bottom brackets and cranksets were designed for triple rings, so installing a narrow, wide one by the chain ring often means using a modern crank with a 49mm offset or adjusting spacers to keep the chain straight. With careful alignment, a 32-tooth ring fits cleanly, offering enough range for most trails. The derailleur hanger, forged steel on these bikes, is checked for alignment with a gauge. No more than 1 or 2 degrees off is acceptable. A short cage one by derailleur bolts right on, ready to manage a wide-range cassette. Brakes present a choice. Some riders keep the original cantilevers for period-correct looks, while others opt for mechanical disc brakes using IS adapters. The shop manager shows how to mount a disc caliper to the seat stay with an adapter, then threads a new cable through the external guides, a straightforward process on these open, accessible frames. Shifters are swapped for modern trigger pods, and cables are routed externally, making maintenance easy. Sourcing the right parts is part detective work, part patience. Hubs, cranks, and derailleurs come from online marketplaces, local swaps, or the shop's own bins. The total cost for a reliable retro mod lands between $500 and $900, depending on the quality of the drivetrain and wheels. The result is a bike that blends the strength and comfort of Chromoly 4130 steel with the crisp performance of modern shifting. A build that is both personal and practical, ready to ride for years to come. A steel frame builder stands over a battered stump jumper, torch in hand, checking the alignment of the lugs before heating the joint. Unlike a cracked carbon frame, which often means the end of the road, a lugged chromoly bike can be repaired with a brazing rod and patience. The process is straightforward. Heat the joint until the brass flows, replace the damaged tube, and check for straightness. 3 points get special attention. Tubes must be free of major dents, lugs should show no gaps or corrosion, and the rear triangle must sit square to the main frame within 2 millimeters of tolerance. Repairability is not just theoretical. Many 1980s frames have survived crashes, cargo conversions, and decades of daily use thanks to this method. Restorers often point out the trade-off. A steel mountain bike weighs about 2 kilograms more than a carbon or high-end aluminum model. For most riders, the extra weight is a small price to pay for the peace of mind that comes with a frame that can be inspected, fixed, and trusted for decades. Inspection is a routine part of the process. Tubes and lugs are checked for straightness, rust is hunted down and treated, and alignment is measured with a simple gauge. If a problem is found, it is usually fixable. Longevity matters to riders and shops alike. Affordability and sustainability also drive the comeback. Vintage steel frames are easy to find and inexpensive to restore, making them accessible to a wider range of riders. In a world of planned obsolescence, where modern carbon bikes can be written off after a single crash, the ability to repair and reuse a steel frame takes on new meaning. Community bike shops and co-ops have become gathering places for this movement, where knowledge is shared and another generation learns the art of keeping old bikes alive. Right now, steel mountain bikes from the 1980s are outlasting many modern frames, proof that thoughtful design can endure beyond trends. As planned obsolescence shapes much of today's cycling industry, riders are reclaiming durability and simplicity. Sometimes the best way forward is to rediscover what already works.